This is Sporting Life.
Hello, it's time for another Sporting Life racing podcast. Welcome along. I'm Matt Brocklebank, and this week I'm joined by Ben Linfoot, David Johnson, Billy Nash, and Graham Cunningham. Now, we have an awful lot to chew through this week, and it's been a roller coaster ride, to say the least. Graham, we're getting going with the ultimate low points of the racing weekend, sadly. Not only the death of 25-year-old Keegan Kirby, the point-to-point rider who was part of the Paul Nicholls setup there, and a very positive, bright young man by all accounts, but some equine stars too. GC, you tackled this topic in your written piece on Sporting Life on Tuesday. Why did you address it, and how's it been received?
Hi, morning all. Yeah, great question. What can you say? It's a devastating game at times, and Keegan Kirby, obviously a well-loved, precious member of a very, very young and energetic team at Paul Nicholls. So there's nothing other you can say other than condolences to all his friends and family and all that team down there. Can't imagine what Paul Nicholls' journey back from Musselburgh on Sunday night must have been. He'd had 4 winners there. He got the news that one of his young team members had been killed in a point-to-point for age 25, young lad, just getting going, chasing his dream. And knowing that he had to go back and speak to the family, try to motivate his team again, tell them everything's going to be all right. But for that lad and his family, horrific. But it's not just that. There's news coming through overnight of an exercise rider based at Santa Anita who's been killed. It brought to mind Graham Lee and the predicament he's in after, terrible, terrible fall at Newcastle a couple of months ago. So it's widespread. And I am of the Ruby Walsh mentality that, creatures from outside the door can never be considered on a par with the importance of humans inside it. Now, that may sound callous to some animal rights people, but that's my opinion. But in terms of the tone of that piece that I wrote yesterday, Matt, it was asking questions of people. And I think the reaction to it, you touched on a key point here, the reaction to it I found very, very, very instructive. The 2 questions were, if you haven't read the piece, how many storms can you weather as a fan, as a participant, as someone who's engaged in this game? And where's your line when you start to feel uneasy, uncomfortable about how many horses are badly injured or worse in this game? And it's a spate recently of the high-profile ones always get more publicity, but it's not long till May. That's all right, Gino. It's a very promising young horse of David Armstrong and Lee Westwood's at Musselburgh. Fell on the line, having won the race. Get a gin. It's, of course, Hermes Allen and its Absolute Notions at the weekend. And there was nothing particularly dramatic about that piece. I just wanted to ask the question. And combined Sporting Life Twitter account and my Twitter feed, it's had upwards of 15,000 views, which is a fairly significant number. Now, Matt, no jokes are relevant here, but either it was just a boring piece or the question was too uncomfortable for people to really address, because I got practically no reaction to it. And I just think it takes people to a dark, uncomfortable place. And I do think racing is very, very good at moving on past awkward moments. I think we saw the Milton Harris inappropriate incident dealt with on ITV at the weekend in shorter order than it used to take to cover the old picture puzzle. Keep it moving. Form the prayer circle on Twitter and move it along. Thoughts and prayers. And it's all right not to have a line. It's all right just to say, I trust the regulator to make this addictive, dangerous, extreme sport as safe as possible. And then what will be, will be. It's okay not to have that line. But I found it very informative that lots of people were keen to read it. Not too many people were anxious to address where their own personal line, and it's a very personal thing, where that line is.
I think we're all probably guilty of that ourselves, aren't we, at certain stages when it comes to these stories. I mean, well said. GC. I don't know if anyone else wants to chip in terms of the talent, obviously, that we'd lost on the track. Scoop, Hermes Allen, obviously, was a Grade 1 winner and a real star from the yard. So it's a major blow, isn't it, that the whole Nichols yard has received over the weekend?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, GC summed it up very nicely there, that it's put more in the spotlight when it is high-profile horses, and like you said, we've seen so many. And Hermes Allen was probably in Paul Nichols's top 2 novices over fences going forward, and a real shame. And it is a very personal thing, isn't it, where your line is? I remember covering Many Clouds when he died at Cheltenham, and that was a real tough one for me to take personally. I absolutely love that horse, and I had to write a piece on the day, and it was all about the death of Many Clouds. And racing has this tendency to have brilliant highs and devastating lows. It's high stakes stuff. And it is a fabulous sport at its best, and it's brutal at its worst. And I think it is quite reflective of life in general.
Yeah.
And for me, the threshold, I am comfortable with it. I am comfortable with the amount of safety that goes into racing to keep that percentage as low as it possibly can in terms of equine deaths. And of course, when high-profile ones meet their demise, it does make you think. It does make you wonder if we're all doing the right thing in cheering these horses on. But ultimately, I think we are, and we've got to look at the positives of what a fabulous sport it can be.
I think very well said, Scoop. I would agree in terms of to appreciate those highs, you're going to have lows in any walk of life, and I think you've both absolutely nailed it on the head there. And in terms of bouncing back and moving on, we saw it in absolute up in lights in the Tattersalls Island Sales Ring on Monday, didn't we? Obviously, not irony, but the fact that those connected with Hermes Allen were willing to dive straight back in and have got hold of Caldwell Potter, a promising horse. And again, GC, as you mentioned, that the Caldwell construction team, Andy and Gemma Brown, citing the death of several high-profile, promising young horses as a factor behind them wanting to exit stage left. You could barely make that up.
Yeah, I'd like to throw to Billy and David on this, but the weirdness, flat-out weirdness of the fact that the sellers are getting out of the game for now because they have a young family and it's hard to explain the death of young horses. The 3 old geezers, John Hales, Sir Alex Ferguson and Jed Mason, are saying full steam ahead. We've lost one. We want a champion, a star to light our later years, later in life. 740,000 euros for Caldwell Potter, who in turn is a full brother to Mighty Potter, a real potential star who lost his life in the spring of last year on the racecourse. So it's a bizarre treble. But I'll throw to Billy and then David on this. Caldwell Potter, and let's get down to the racing now. Were you surprised that he fetched that much? And is he likely to fulfill the hopes of the new team?
Was I surprised he fetched that much? Probably not, in a word, because when you look at untested point-to-point winners, horses that have won 1 point-to-point, going for upwards of 350,000-400 grand on a regular basis, when you've got a proven quantity here, and already a Grade 1 winner, very promising horse with a great pedigree, he was always going to go for big bucks. Now 740 is a massive chunk of change, and he's going to have to do something spectacular to get their money back from that. But look, they have a ready-made racehorse. I mean, if they can keep him in one piece, which obviously is the be-all and the end-all, then you'd have to think that he's a horse that's going to get better with age. He's probably going to be a better chaser. He's going to be better when he goes out and trips. So they'll feel that they may have got value for money. Now, he's going to have to win a significant number of Grade 1s to get that money back, but at least they should give him a fighting chance. Let's not forget Robcore as well, who also lost Absolute Notions.
Yep.
They also went back into the market and paid what I thought was quite a lot of money for Fildor, 620. Again, that's a lot of money to spend on that horse. But again, they were willing to do it. So look, let's just see how it plays out.
David, I think obviously 29 lots in total, but I think 8 remained with Gordon Elliott. But the high flyers were in town, weren't they? And I saw Imagine, and it was Molly's Mango, wasn't it? They now go to Harry Derham, and we've seen Mighty Bandit move yards to Warren Greattrek. I just wondered if there was any sort of major big surprises in there for you away from the headline grabber.
Well, yeah, I think the two that you mentioned quite surprising, the amount of money involved for the yards that they've gone to. And I think that was one of the things that we were hoping for in terms of what was going to come out of the sale, that it wasn't going to be a case of them all stay with Gordon or ending up with some of the more expensive ones going to Willie Mullins and, ending up with an even stronger hand than what he already had. So, I think it's obviously good for the game. And if these better horses are going to end up being spread out. And I think that's sort of one of the interesting things with regards to Caldwell Potter and the amount of money that he's costing. You just can't see it as a financial transaction, as can you really, in terms of whether it makes sense or not. They're not paying that much because they expect to recoup that on the track. It's the amount of days out in good quality races that I think they're looking for. And obviously with Hermes Allen meeting his sad demise, and obviously John Hales is involved in that. And I always think, if you can come back from what happened to poor old One Man, you're made of stern stuff. So, I do think John Hales, wish him and hope he ends up getting a good one here as part of that syndicate.
Well said, DJ. But let's get on to one of the key points of this week's podcast. You tweeted pictures of a pretty clean plate, bit of gravy left on. The tenderloin obviously went down nicely. What was your customer experience, before we throw to Ben on this, the fan experience and the working experience of the DRF?
Yeah, I'll hold my hands up. I didn't pay for my ticket, so I always feel as though, I can't complain too much when you're there without having to
Not
pay.
too much.
I was very much in amongst the major crowds, and you can fully acknowledge where people are coming from when they're saying it was extremely busy and it was difficult to get a drink. The queues for the toilets were longer than what you'd expect, and I really do hope that people were getting the sectionals right between that queue and that urinal, because otherwise it could have got rather messy. But I think one of the things is, the DRF, it's ending up a victim of its own success, isn't it? It's building year on year and it's attracting bigger crowds. And I think hopefully the track will be able to learn from that and make sure that, what they're putting out there is suitable for everybody. I mean, it was so difficult getting in queues for taxis and stuff at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people start thinking, well, is it now a case of it's turning into a little mini Cheltenham and I'm not actually that fussed about the hassle anymore?
Scoop, Tom Segal, I was reading this morning, has written some fairly punchy words in the Racing Post. He says it made for fairly depressing viewing for all bar one man, Scoop. You were there, as we've said. Was it just what was it like stepping into Willie's world for this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think depressing's a bit strong. I think there was still some good racing. I know what he's getting at, and it did feel flat. And I would say it was probably the least exciting of all the Dublin Racing Festivals I've been to. There wasn't a wow moment really amongst the weekend. And when you look back and when Faheen won the Novice Chase, there was a huge run, a great reception for him winning that at the age of 12. And Honeysuckle had some great moments. There wasn't really that moment where the crowd lifted the arena, if that makes any sense. And in the parade ring, it was just all a bit flat. I was looking for people to talk to, just, for my colour pieces from the track, and there was hardly anyone there. It was just Mullins surrounded by all these wealthy owners everywhere you look. And with, it's difficult to find a story when that's the case and one man is dominating so much. And so that was my take on it.
Billy, I reckon there was a wow moment for a few in-running punters when they decided to miss the final fence and the final hurdle, having jumped it the previous circuit in some very high-profile races. I would imagine there was a bit of, wow, what on earth's going on here? That's an odd situation. Is that new to you, Billy? Is that right? Should they be putting all this responsibility on basically one man's shoulders, looking up whether the sun's going to peak between the clouds mid-race?
Yeah, it's a new one on me, Matt. I hadn't seen that before. I don't ever remember a hurdle being jumped, a hurdle or a fence being jumped on the first circuit and not on the second, that they just decide in the middle of a race, oh, the sun is shining, we're going to take this out. Now, obviously, you can see why they did it. It's a big health and safety concern, but is it health and safety gone mad? I'm not really sure. The other thing is they can't apparently do it the other way around. So if they missed, let's say, the last hurdle, if they missed it on the first circuit, they couldn't then put it back in if the sun went behind the cloud. So the whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Matt, but I'm sure they did it for the right reasons.
And just a line from you on the absolute domination. Do you think this will eventually seriously compromise the general engagement in jumps racing in Ireland?
It could do. You'd have to look at, where is the opposition to Willie Mullins? Look, Gordon Elliott didn't really turn up this weekend. He only had one winner, 28-1 in a big handicap. So you look at the big trainers in Ireland. I was having a look this morning, like the big names, the big yards. Noel Meade had two runners over the weekend. Noel Meade, Jessica Harrington, Joseph O'Brien are three of the biggest, or certainly go back a couple of years ago, were three of the biggest national hunt trainers in Ireland. Between them, they had a total of 9 runners over the weekend. All of those have concentrated more on the flat than over jumps lately. If you go through the top 10 trainers in the current list in Ireland, you have obviously Mullins, de Bromhead, and Gordon Elliott dominate. But go below them, the likes of Gavin Cromwell, Martin Brazel, Peter Fahey, John Ryan, Philip Rothwell, none of them trained a winner at the meeting. And Noel Meade. They're all the top 10 of Irish trainers at the moment. So there isn't a massive opposition to Willie. And the way he's going, it's only going in one direction, Matt, because, we talked about people spending an awful lot of money on national hunt horses these days. If you're spending that money, you want some return and you want to send it to the best trainer, and he is the best at the moment.
GC, can I just come to you with this? I might be going a little bit off piste here, and forgive me if that feels the way, but are we overlooking a little bit the fact that a number of Willie's main rivals in the past decade have had massive personal setbacks in the past few years? Firstly, we had Gordon Elliott losing a lot of horses after his moment of madness in the spring of 2021. Henry de Bromhead and family were obviously completely struck by tragedy the following year. And also in 22, Jessica Harrington, it became apparent, who was being diagnosed with cancer. Are these periods of considerable upheaval in any way related to Mullins just getting stronger and stronger during that same time frame?
Yeah, they're all interesting points, which I hadn't really factored in. But I do think that there is clear evidence now, Billy touched on, that there's certain trainers, Joseph, I think, would be a fair example, maybe Jesse, certainly Noel Meade, are heading for the hills, heading for the flat, rather than have to take on Willie and Gordon on a regular basis. And this is an interesting debate. And I hear people say, Jane Mangan, I saw a headline said we should rejoice in this Willie domination and this awe-inspiring success. Yeah, I get that line of argument, but that is not taking into account that many, many fans will find this a bit of a turn-off. Ed Chamberlain touched on this. It was there in his voice last week about how he was hoping other trainers aim up. We'll come to Nickelback and horses like that in a minute. It's really refreshing. So I think it is a worry. Absolute domination within any sport is a bit of a passion killer for a lot of fans. To round this little segment off, and I'm glad you mentioned Tom Segal in the intro. To quote Tom, and remember, this is a bloke who has to watch Reading. I took my greyhound out for a long walk on Sunday rather than get annoyed with ridiculous horse races. Now, I don't think they were ridiculous, not by a long chalk, but they were not as competitive or as compelling as we'd like them to be. And another point that I think does not get mentioned, when one trainer has not just the red hot jolly, but the second favourite, the third favourite, the fourth favourite, etc., it takes out a little tactical element in that, by and large, you can rely on the fact that the chosen one, the real hot pot, is going to get the saloon passage. Nobody is going to do what was that horse of Ginny Pittman's that went up against Carville's Hill, the Golden Freeze, the stalking horse. We're going way back in time here to say, right, just get into this favourite's ribs here. let's jump up sides it, try and put a bit of pressure on. So it's taking out competition in more ways than one. And is there an answer? No. You can limit the number of horses a trainer can train. You can limit the number of horses a trainer can run in one race. But it's systematic. Billy, I'm sure will add to this. It's systematic at Close Sutton. They have a tremendous scouting system, but perhaps even more so, it seems to me from a distance that they have at least 3 or 4 potentially high-class trainers within one operation. Willie at the helm, Patrick, David Casey, Ruby Walsh. You're calling on absolute, leaders in the field here. And so the domination is awe-inspiring and it's not going anywhere. So buckle up. It's not going anywhere. Willie Mullins, with Cheltenham coming up, has an astonishing hand of cards to play.
Well, we'll look to lift the mood slightly in a second when we do the 5-star rating.
The mood is high.
Grade
The mood is
1
high.
David, let's just crunch a little bit of the numbers on the big one, the Irish Gold Cup. This was obviously one of the 8 Grade 1. Galopin Des Champs beat Old Foe Fast or Slow quite comfortably, I thought, in the end. Am I right in thinking their time form ratings have stayed largely the same as they were going into the race?
That's correct, yeah, pretty much. And, you can understand why that's the case. It was only a 4-runner race. They've gone pretty steadily. Conflated is a horse that we know a fair bit about nowadays. If he'd have stood up, he'd have probably only been beaten 7 or 8 lengths. So you can't really be suggesting that Galopin Des Champs has run to the level or would have run to the level that he did back at Christmas or in the Gold Cup. But
so why is he shortened in the betting? Why is he shortened in the betting, having run a slightly less impressive performance?
Because I guess the reason for that is that the second favourite was Fast or Slow and was comfortably put in his place. So if we know that Galopin Des Champs has beaten him here and has potentially another gear to go to when it really matters, then it's very difficult to see why he won't win the Gold Cup again, isn't it?
The John Bond dream is dead. He was taken out of the Ryanair Chaser midweek. I just wondered if anyone could see the runner-up Fast or Slow dropping back to the shorter distance. I saw the time form report mentioned that JJ Slevin obviously typically rides the current Ryanair favourite or one of the favourites, Banbridge. But would that be a factor, Billy?
I don't think so, Matt. Look, they're owned by 2 completely different people. Obviously, Banbridge runs in the colours of Ronnie Bartlett and Fast or Slow Sean Mulryan. So I don't think so. I think they put him in the Ryanair just as an alternative. I think he's Gold Cup all the way. And I don't expect him to beat Galopin Des Champs, but I could certainly see him finishing second to Galopin Des Champs again at Cheltenham. I think he is the best of the rest at the moment.
Was that a 5-star performance for you, Billy? Galopin?
Well, you'd probably give it 4, Matt. I mean, he wasn't as he wasn't as impressive as he had been at Christmas. His jumping was a little bit careful. You couldn't really say he made a mistake. He wasn't as flamboyant as he could be. But he won really nicely. I think Fast or Slow. I think Cheltenham might suit him a little bit better even. I think JJ Slevin would like to get a bit more cover on him. I always felt he was doing plenty in the early part of the race. And I think if he could ride him a bit more patiently, get him a bit of cover and deliver him later than he was able to at the weekend, that might help. But I don't know if it's going to be good enough to get him past Galopin Des Champs. But I think we could see a better Galopin at Cheltenham. You can be sure Willie has left plenty to work on.
If he was a 4, who were your 5-star, Billy, for the weekend?
I think if I was giving out a 5-star rating, Matt, I might give it to Stateman in the champion hurdle, simply because he is just metronomic, that horse. He just turns up and does it every single day. It doesn't matter what they throw at him. It doesn't matter what way you ride the race or drop him in, make the running. He just turns up, does what he does, wins his race, always seems to win with a bit of despair. Obviously, unless he's bumping into a Constitution Hill. But look, he is by far and away the best of the Irish hurdlers. And I thought it was another rock solid performance by him. He's just a horse you can set your clock by. Ballyburn wouldn't be far away. I thought that was another really impressive performance by him. I know you weren't mad about the format. You were questioning it. I think it was a really deep race, and I think it's a race that threw up a whole load of pointers for Cheltenham, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Ballyburn, because I just like to swim against the tide occasionally. And I know that everyone's scrambling over themselves to be on him for Cheltenham. 2 points with that. I did find that maybe he obviously got the run of the race to some respect, and the second favourite didn't quite live up to expectations. Farron Blory seemed to be jumping out to his right and was very scratchy and not himself.
Played, I think.
The other point about Ballyburn, I'll come to you, Scoop, as well, is that have the markets got this a little bit wrong? Because he's suddenly, let's take out the nominal no bet situation. The best price you're getting for the Supreme now is 13-8. And you can back him at 3-1 for the Bearing Bingham, the longer race on the Wednesday. Now, obviously, at the start of the season, it was the longer race was the target. I know David Casey's been on the Nick Luck show since the DRF saying, well, we were still thinking in 2.5 miles. Scoot, where would you go with Ballyburn?
Definitely Bearing Bingham over 2 mile 5. He looks all stamina to me. I mean, it's there throughout his pedigree. I thought he finished his race really strongly, similar to Sigerhard in the way he won it a few years ago, and he obviously stepped up to the Ballymore. Willie at the start of the season.
He swerved Constitution Hill.
Willie at the start of the season was even talking about Ballymore for this. So I think he's sort of thrown his hat into the ring for the Supreme, hasn't he? Just because he's shown that he's capable over 2 miles. But I think it all depends on when Willie's looking at what cards he's got to play a couple of days before the festival, and if he's got a Supreme Novices chance like the Mystical Power, for example, if he's happy with him, I can see Ballyburn going back up to 2.5 miles, and it all just depends on what he's got to play with when it comes to declaration time. But I was really impressed with him. I thought he was fantastic, and I wouldn't rule out the second either from Cheltenham calculations, Slade Steele. I thought he progressed again on his third run over hurdles, and also showed himself to be capable over 2 miles. And I know it looks dead obvious for him to step up in trip to the Ballymore, what used to be the Ballymore. I keep saying Ballymore, but I just wonder, having spoke to Henry de Bromhead after the race, if he might just go where Ballyburn doesn't, and a strongly run 2 miles in the Supreme might suit him, and he's a much bigger price for that race than he is the Ballymore. So I thought he's interesting and definitely on the radar.
GC, who topped the power rankings for you over the weekend?
I think Ballyburn's very hard to find too many faults with. It's just a body language thing, Matt. But I love that head carriage. He's got that low head carriage, a bit like El Fabiolo. It sort of really indicates a hunger to really hit the line hard, and he got into a beautiful flow, jumped very well, powered away. I just got the impression there was loads more left, so he's going to be a very short price whichever race he goes for, but I won't be in any rush to take him on. From a ratings point of view, the lads will confirm he's already in the 150s. It's bang where you need to be to win either of those two big novice hurdles at Cheltenham. Already.
DJ, who else ticked off some big ratings in terms of these Grade 1 winners then?
Well, I don't think, sort of that was part of the issue, is that so many of the top horses were a little bit underwhelming, even if they were quite interesting races. Ilete Tom, the Irish Arkle threw up far more questions than answers, didn't it? And there's a whole heap of horses coming out with ratings in the mid 150s from that. He's obviously been to Cheltenham twice. As a 4-year-old, he lacked the experience, didn't he, in the Triumph? He didn't jump that well when he went to the Supreme last year. But I think fences do suit him. He's a lot better jumper of fences than he was hurdles, and he travels, he finds the pressure. You can see why he's towards the head of the betting, for all he doesn't set a standard that is going to be that difficult to be. To win an Arkle, you're probably talking more like a 160 performance. So he's going to have to improve, I think, there. The one to take out, not so much to take out, but the one that really impressed me most over the weekend was going back to Statement. And I just think there's a real good chance that he's actually still improving this year. It was a rock solid performance at Christmas, backed up by a really good time. And I think, he's probably gone and improved on that here. And whether that's going to be enough to see him shake up Constitution Hill remains to be seen. But I'd be confident he'll put up a career best in the Champion Hurdle this time around.
Can I just pick up on that? David, what would you think, or what would you think would be the preferred tactic? They tucked him in behind Constitution Hill. last year, and Constitutional Hill just ran off between the last two flights, and that was it. It was my impression overall, looking back to last year's race, that if he's going to give Constitution Hill a serious race, it probably has to be the Statesman getting first run down the hill this time. Would you agree with that?
Quite probably, yeah. I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? I remember we were talking about Energumene and Shishkin about how you might sort of go around reversing. I think what they've got to do is just concentrate on running their absolute best, and whatever they can do to get Stateman as close to the 170 that he might be capable of. And then if Constitution Hill does go and run to 178, nearly 180, then you're not going to beat him. But I think the last thing that they need to be doing is sort of trying to concentrate too much on what the other horse is doing, and just concentrate on getting the absolute optimum out of their horse.
And
the reason I'm thinking is it could be 5 or 6 runners, lads. It could be 5 or 6 runners, the Champion Hurdle, and therefore, tactics are going to be very intriguing, I think.
Yeah, no Bob Ollinger, no Imperial Pass, and there was another one.
No Lossy Mouth.
Couple of high-profile names taken out of the Champion Hurdle this week, so that's going to come under the spotlight a lot. Billy, the other big race I wanted to touch on was the Ladbrokes Novice Chase. I thought Willie Mullins made some quite interesting comments about Ballyburn's owners and their understanding around the nature of injuries in top-level sport. It was almost like he'd just got off the phone to someone who was being a little less understanding. In unrelated news, Grange Player West was a big miss in that race. And back to file, basically bludgeoned Gaelic Warrior. I mean, the Brown advisory market's certainly thrown into disarray now, because Fact to File has been absolutely slashed for the Turners.
Yeah, before I get on to Fact to File, I mean, yes, you mentioned Grange Clare West was taken out. We believe he was cast in his box, and if that's the case, these things happen. But why was American Mike taken out? That's what I couldn't understand on Sunday morning. They pulled him out because of the change in going, which makes absolutely no sense to me, Matt. He was declared on what was good to soft ground on Friday. We called it soft on Saturday, and we called it soft again on Sunday, but times would suggest that it was probably veering towards good to soft again on Sunday.
And he was the horse that beat the winner first time.
He had beaten him in the beginner's chase, yeah. So I don't know what ground they were expecting to get. And certainly it's a grade 1. There was only 2 horses left in the race. Why wouldn't you just let him take his chance? I mean, all he had to do was stand up to pick up a big paycheck, you know?
He took the one out of the Irish Champion Hurdle for the ground as well, didn't he? So I don't know whether he's I
think he was lame. I think Phil Dudery was lame. But it's something that Elliott does on a regular basis, is takes horses out because of a change in going. I think it's something they need to look at. Now, it's probably immaterial because they'll find some other excuse and some other way to take horses out. But this whole change in going thing just irritates me. Getting back to Fact to File, Matt, we're still probably a little bit in the dark the way the race worked out. Gaelic Warrior, to me, seemed to be going along fine. Yes, he was jumping out to his right a little bit, but not too bad until he made a mistake 4 out. And whatever he did to himself there, he looked like he might have hurt himself the way he landed at the 4th last. But even at that stage, I think the writing was kind of on the wall, because Fact to File was right on top of him there. He was certainly jumping better than him. And look, you'd have to like what Fact to File did, but it's very difficult to put a figure on it. I mean, it's impossible to know what he actually achieved in winning that race. But he's on a really good trajectory. He's getting better with every run. He seems to have taken really well to fences. Personally, I'd love to see him run in the 3-mile race, but I don't think they will. I think they'll wait and let him run the intermediate distance this year. I get the impression they have Gold Cup aspirations with this horse, and I don't think they want to stretch him out too early in his career. So I think he'll go the 2.5-mile race, and he'll take an offset of beating.
Can I pick up on that? Isn't it amazing to think about what might have been if Willie Mullins had done what he should have done and taken Gaelic Warrior out, snagged the walkover for Fact to File? You have Fact to File going to Cheltenham nice and fresh, and Gaelic Warrior is still a very short price for whichever race you want. Joking apart, I want to touch on this Fact to File, and I'll quote Simon Rowlands. I always read these sectional pieces with interest. Simon Rowlands, I quote, remember, the Fact to File carried £23 more than Hartwood, who won a good handicap on the same card, off a mark of 136, and he ran the extended 21 furlongs 15 lengths faster, eased several lengths late on. So bizarrely though it may seem, he won a race where no other horse finished and only 2 started. But on the clock, he seems to, Billy, have put up a very, very notable performance, coming out stones ahead of a good handicap winner.
Now, we joked, didn't we, last week about Joe Chambers floating the idea of Gaelic Warrior to the Scilly Isles, and he must have been tearing his hair out watching that. I'm sure we'll get to that Sandown race in a very quick moment. But just finally on the DRF, then I just want a few horses or a horse from each of you that we can take forward, not necessarily for Cheltenham, but anything whilst we're with you, GC. I know you flagged one up from the juvenile race that you were keen to mention.
Yeah, I'm not sure how deep that graded juvenile race was on the Saturday, and they all finished in a bit of a heap. And Willie Mullins was it the first two home, Carjesi, first four home, Carjesi, Stormheart, and in third, Majborough, a horse I didn't know a great deal about beforehand, but I think we'll hear plenty of him in the next few months and even the longer term. He looks a big, very good-looking horse, and considering this was his first run over hurdles in Ireland, I thought he ran an absolute belter, out on the front, jumping well, just done for a bit of speed late on. So not sure what they'll do with him because there are plenty of options, but I'm sure he's going to win races short and medium term. Majborough.
What went in the notebook when you were there?
Yeah, quite a few, Matt. I was on that the Cromwell horse that fell at the last in the handicap chase, Percival Le Galois. I thought he would have given the winner a really good race at Gold if he'd stayed on his feet. So I think he's probably one to keep on the right side of going forward. I thought Paul Nolan's mare in the Paddy Mullins race, Feet of a Dancer, ran well. She was placed in third, flat to the boards the whole way, but really nice attitude. And Paul Nolan says he'll be stepping up back in trip in the spring at something like, he'll miss Cheltenham, but go for something like Fairy House or Punchestown. And over 2.5 miles, I think she might have a handicap in her. So Feet of a Dancer, definitely one to watch.
And Billy's so Scottish for me. I'm sure he's going to land on a nice race, whether it's over fences or he sticks over hurdles. I thought he just did a bit too much too soon. Anything from the handicaps or elsewhere, Billy?
There was two that caught my eye, Matt. One with Cheltenham in mind, one possibly not. In the juvenile hurdle, I thought Ethical Diamond of Willie Mullins's. It was very disappointing at Christmas when he was sent off a short price favourite. But they rode him totally differently in the juvenile hurdle. They dropped him right out. Probably, if you were being critical, you'd say giving him too much to do. But I really like the way he finished out his race. Now, it's very interesting. DJ touched on it with Salvatore Mundi when we were talking about it last week. He's still a novice, so what will they do with him? I mean, it's quite likely that they'll run him in the Triumph and run him in the Grade 1 at Punchestown. If he's good enough to pick up one of those races, well and good. If not, he's going to make a lovely novice for next year. And the other horse who coincidentally ran in the same colours was Absurd, who finished fourth to Ballyburn in the Grade 1 novice hurdle. I thought that was a really nice performance by him with the view to something like the county hurdle in mind. He's now had his mandatory 4 runs over hurdles. I think on better ground we'd see a much better horse, and I think the hustle and bustle of something like a county hurdle would really suit him. So they were just two of many names that I noted down this weekend, Matt.
Yeah, Absurd was one where I think he halved in price just before the off from 50 to 1 to 25s, and then you saw him making that sweeping move and thought he's coming with a winning run, but it did flatten out in the end. David, I will take one from you as well from the DRF, and if you can then move on to the Scilly Owls as well, and maybe rate the effort of Nickelback there. Probably, a bit of a blessing that the Irish didn't come over for that in the end, because it allowed Sarah Humphreys and James Best to get their day in the sun. But first one from the DRF, David.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a bonus one as well, because there's two from the same race, and it was a staying handicap hurdle on the Saturday. But I'd be pretty confident they're going to end up going very different paths. The first one is the runner-up, Gway Cool. She was the only one to get involved from off the pace and was forced very wide to do so. But I was really impressed with the way that she moved into the race. She might be even better on quicker ground as well. There's a slight niggle in that she disappointed when she came over to Aintree last year, but I thought it was a really good trial for the Potemps. She's already qualified for that race, having won one of the qualifiers at Christmas. So she was really interesting. And the other one is the fourth, Panda Boy, who I think we'll be seeing going back over fences much sooner rather than later. He's got some really solid handicap form. he made a mistake 3 out, wasn't fluent there, and then just got badly tapped for toe. And then he's rallied really strongly and was looking better the further he went. And I think the key thing to this horse is stepping back up in trip. He shaped pretty well in the Irish National last year. I noticed that he's been entered in the Grand National this week, and Panda Boy, he's pretty much gone to the top of my Grand National shortlist for Martin Brassel on the back of this run at the weekend.
David,
Could be tight.
could be one of the could be one of the bubble horses. A very readable piece on sportinglife.com by Lewis Tomlinson about the shape of the new Grand National with the 34 reduced field and which horses might end up on the OLI, as I call it, on the outside looking in. And he's one of the potential OLIs at the moment.
Oh, okay.
David, Nickelback,
That's-
possibly
Yeah.
the Turners, possibly straight to Aintree.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? They've obviously bagged the grade one here, and I think that's the story, really. It's the good campaigning, taking in the race that was run to suit here and now rather than waiting for the festival. And I think what we saw on Saturday was the absolute peak of Nickelback, a smallish field. Now, he didn't dictate as such, did he? Because he went hard, he set a real strong pace and got all the others at it, and they just could never lay a glove on him. And I think that's the tricky thing with regards thinking about how he might go in a Turners. It'd be very difficult to see him getting the run of that race in the way that he did this. So I think if he was mine, I would be tempted to wait for Aintree, and particularly as I'm a backer of Ginny's Destiny, I'd be delighted to see him wait for Aintree. But it's obviously a first winner at grade one level for James Best and Sarah Humphrey, and it's the kind of thing that you like to see. We talk so much about the domination of 2 or 3 yards, and that's been a real feature of this podcast and the racing that we've been looking back on. But this was just one of those great stories of a good horse that smaller connections have found and are very much getting the best out of.
Exactly. This is how you remind me of the value of small trainers and journeyman jockeys having a big day. Thank you.
It's a great story, Billy, but I reckon these Irish novices are quaking over Nickelback about as much as they are about Nicky Henderson's novice hurdler, Jinko Blue. I saw he was cut. What was the reaction? Bookmaker reaction? They were cutting him for the Baring Bingham and the Albert Bart at this Jinko Blue. He won the handicap of 124. Am I right, Billy? Am I right?
Yes, you are definitely right, Matt. Yeah, look, he was very impressive, but he won off a mark of 124. Like you said, he ran to a time form rating of 131. Ballyburn is rated 153 with a P after his performance at Leopardstown. So that'll tell you the sort of bridge he needs to, or the gap he needs to bridge. Just to put his performance into perspective, Matt, I was just having a look back at some other high-profile horses that won handicaps that went to Cheltenham novices afterwards. My Tentor Yours is probably the most high-profile of them all. He won a Betfair hurdle off 149 and got beaten in the Supreme. So Jinko Blue is a long way to go to be up to that level, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up a few more bits from the weekend because I want 10 minutes on Saturday's action coming up at Newbury and Warwick. GC, you've touched on Sunday's meeting was there was a sad note there, obviously, at the end of the card, but Paul Nicholls did end up dominating there with a 4-timer. This Liari, he was probably the pick of the bunch in terms of having that sort of top class aspirations this season.
I think so. They've all got to go a long way to be at the peak form. So Jinko, by the look of it, but he looks a strong, progressive horse. I was pleased with the way he handled a sharpish track like Musselburgh over the weekend. Big weekend for Lucinda Russell and Peter Scudamore, 2 very, very valuable winners. But I think the overriding point, Bill Farnsworth of Musselburgh said that they had to really shake out the biscuit tin to get extra prize money to keep the Premier status for that weekend. He said, we're jumping off a cliff and hoping the parachute opens. I'm not sure it did fully. They got good competitive racing, but not really any better than they previously had. So this Premier Racing project, it's a conversation for another day, but I don't think Musselburgh thought they got quite as much bang for their buck as they hoped. Lucinda did.
She certainly did, yeah. She landed a notable double. I was looking at her form going into the weekend. It was for January, I think they were 8% from 50 runners. They were fairly quiet, managed to snag the Edinburgh National as well as the Scottish Champion Chase. That was Inishaw and Corrigan Rock. Scoop, just back to Sandown quickly. We saw Peking Opera, 100 and odd on the flat for Aidan O'Brien. Debut for Gary Moore in the Goshen Silks, and he got the job done nicely. This is a horse to take seriously.
Yeah, I think so. It's great to see a high-class flat horse take the hurdles route, isn't it? Like you say, he was rated 105 on the flat for Aidan, ran in a Queen's Vase at Royal Ascot, won a listed race, placed in a Group 3 behind Vauban. So he's got that good flat pedigree by Galileo out of a Warfront mare, Coolmore bred, and yeah, you never know how they're going to take to hurdles, do you? And he'd had a lot 6 months off the track and been gelded, etc. But I thought he hurdled nicely. I thought he jumped well under Niall Houlihan, who got him some cover. I know he was getting loads of weight, wasn't he, from the Ben Pauling horse, the Good Doctor, which you have to factor in terms of what he actually achieved. And I think we will learn more next time if we go to Kempton for the Adonis Hurdle. But it was a encouraging start, let's put it like that, and we'll look forward to seeing him next time and see if he can progress into perhaps a Triumph Hurdle contender.
Triumph Hurdle to Grand National, Billy. Let's just talk Aintree quickly. The initial entries have been made. The winner's somewhere among that 94 names. I won't ask you for that at this stage, but it's pretty clear the discussion over trainer domination isn't going anywhere come Aintree in the spring. It may be more stark than ever, I suppose.
The first thing that struck me, Matt, when I saw that was it's a good job they haven't limited trainers to just 4 runners each, because we'd have a very small field in the Grand National if that was the case.
We'd have to go 24 maximum field, I think, to fill it from the Brits, wouldn't we?
I think so, yeah.
We'd have a few assistants taking out licenses sharply, shouldn't we?
But yeah, 64 Irish, 39 combined Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullins. That's the headline, isn't it?
I think Elliott is responsible for 26 of them alone, isn't he? Which is phenomenal. And look, you read down through the list of names, Matt, there's at least half of them would be complete no-hopers if they did turn up on the day. So it's more quantity over quality, I think.
Billy, this is interesting. Yeah, this is interesting. Sorry, no, this is interesting, and the worry that Gordon and Willie combined, I think, are 42% of the total entries. It's easy to see a situation where they have half the field. And again, I'll quote Lewis Tomlinson in this piece on sportinglife.com. At the moment, in the anti-post market, only Capodanno from those, how many, 42% of the entries is under 33-1. So the potential for, they're not bed blockers, but they're not horses that are capturing the imagination of the anti-post punters. So it could be a very, very odd shape to the Grand National. I think you're going to ask me about the off time, Matt, are you?
I sort of get it in a sense, but my question to you, GC, is how much evapotranspiration can one get in the space of an hour? This is talking about the ground drying out from 4 to 5 o'clock. Is that madness?
Yeah, a couple of quotes. It's a 4 p.m. start time back from 5:15 or whatever, and it is quotes to Salika Varma. To maintain optimal jumping ground. Anyone who thinks the ground is going to, dry up massively in that hour and a bit, come on, we're not silly. The heightened tension, I get a little more. The atmosphere, the charged atmosphere that builds as National Day goes on, and the Joker juice starts to flow even more freely. I get that more than the other, but it smacks of a little bit of need to be seen to making some changes here. So good luck to anyone who's playing the National. Good luck to Willie and Gordon with the 42% of the field. It's still good money for second, of course, behind Marla Mission.
But the one thing about that, Matt, is the sun will be still quite high in the sky at 4 o'clock. Will they have to take out fences on the second circuit?
Second circuit. Only on the second circuit. It's a good point. DJ, let's move on. Let's look at the weekend. I'm coming to you for Warwick, if you don't mind. The Kingmaker, it has produced some really good horses over the years. Is there anything that stands out in this year's race? And could we see a late play for the Arkle at Cheltenham, maybe?
It'd be very surprising if this race had too much impact on the Arkle directly, but there is an interesting form line that we'll be looking at with a view to the Arkle, and that's Matata coming out here, who is likely to be a shortish price favourite. And obviously, he was beaten by JPR1 at Linfield last time. And I just wondered if he's going to be slightly vulnerable again here. he's a bit of a tricky horse. If you remember him last season, he absolutely dropped the lot one day at Wincanton, and he hung out to his left and then ran out. And we obviously had the issue with him jumping markedly to his left in the early stages at Linfoot last time. He didn't necessarily do his own chance too much problem last time, but he did obviously some others. But he'd be slightly worried about him at a short price, given what he could be. And he's in here against a really interesting horse of Nicky Henderson's, this Arc Light, who she's only a 5-year-old, so she still gets a couple of pounds weight for age. But what she's done over fences, it shows you why that they've either, worked to get rid of this allowance, because she is taken to fences like a duck to water. She's been really good. She's 3 from 3. The last 2 races that she's won have been mares listed races at Exeter and Wincanton, but she's a really good jumper, and I wouldn't at all be surprised to see her give Matata all the trouble in the world, particularly as Matata is likely to get taken on in front by a horse called Borbelli of Joe Tizard's, who, again, doesn't look quite good enough for a race like this, I don't think, but he could easily act as a spoiler for Matata, and that could set things up nicely for Arc Light, I think.
One day we'll tell you what Daryl Jacob was calling Matata that day after he ran out, but maybe not for right now. Scoop, I've left 4 minutes for the Betfair Hurdle Super Saturday Day at Newbury. 4 hours might not be enough to whittle down the Betfair Hurdle, the main betting race this weekend at Newbury. The first thing that strikes me is that you've got a horse rated 142 at the top. Imagine if they'd run Constitution Hill here. They'd all be out of the weights. Everyone would be lauding him. It'd be Henderson would be back in the good books.
Yeah.
Anything lurking in there for you?
Well, you've touched on it there. A top-rated 142 suggests that this isn't a renewal, a vintage renewal, is it? When you look at Betfair Hurdles in the past, and we've got a 4-to. I mean, I've come back from Ireland to get away from Willie Mullins, and he's got the 4-to-1 favourite in Castle des Marts, who they must think is absolutely lobbed in off a mark of 133, because he just
has it boarded the flight, Billy? That's what we need to know. Has it boarded the flight this morning? We're recording on Wednesday morning. They said they're going to watch the weather.
Is it
I
windy?
don't know.
Is it too windy?
I don't know. It's not windy where I am. It's a lovely sunny morning here, so no excuses on that score. This really interesting point to make about Castle des Marts, Matt, and I was wondering, it's not of Willie's he doesn't run that many in a Betfair Hurdle. I was wondering why they didn't run this horse in the Liffey Hurdle at the weekend, there's not much between them prize money wise. And Willie only had 2 in the Liffey Hurdle. He ran Zenta and he ran Bialystok. He has so many horses in the yard. I was wondering why he didn't run more. I looked into Castle des Marts. He's running off a mark of 133 at the weekend, Matt. He has won 2 handicaps in France. It's very hard to know what that form is worth. He's won off 115 and 124 in France. He's got a BHA mark of 133 at the weekend. His Irish rating is 139. So I think that'll give you a good idea, a good indication as to why Willie has decided to run him at Newbury rather than run him in the race at Leopardstown this weekend. Clearly, they think there's a bit of juice in that mark, I think.
Something seems back to front with me there. That's normally the other way around. Is that right?
It's absolutely normally the other way around. And I think they're trying to take advantage of that little loophole, I think.
A bit like how Gaelic Warrior ended up with a much lower British mark, didn't he, that time? And obviously, so yeah, interesting that. I hadn't spotted
and obviously they held him back to Cheltenham, so, watch this space. Maybe they have something else in mind for Castle des Marts, but this is a big pot. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they did let him take his chance.
Overall, Irish record not brilliant in this, and a race that Willie's never won. Is that fair?
I don't think he's won it. I don't remember him winning it. I remember him finishing placed in the race a few times, but I don't think he has won it. And yes, the Irish record is pretty poor in this race. But look, we don't generally have that many runners in it.
And David, anything stand out for you yet in the Betfair Hurdle?
No, I looked at Warwick.
Good man. As per the plan. Billy, weekend, we've got the 10-up Novice Chase, the Boyne Hurdle at Navan Sunday. Any names stand out for you? There's obviously, Nace as well, isn't there?
Yeah, a couple of interesting ones, Matt. You mentioned the big races there. You're going to see, like the Boyne Hurdle is very interesting. We've got Sir de Burley, obviously. You've got, the likes of Ashdale, Bob, Blazing Callan, and Sir Gerhard. All of them are potentially heading towards the Stayers hurdle. You also have the likes of Delta Work, Galvin, and Beacon Edge, who I presume are being got ready for something else. And intriguingly, Matt Sama-Gest is in the entries for the race. I'm very interested to see what Willie Mullins is going to do with him. But another really interesting Mullins horse this weekend, and he's entered at both places, at Naas on Saturday and at Navan on Sunday, is a horse called Gaucher. Now, Scoop might correct my pronunciation there. He's an ex-French horse. But this must be one of the best bred horses to go jumping this season, Matt. He's by Frankel out of a filly called Left Hand, who won the Prix Vermeil. So absolutely top-class pedigree. He won 2 on the flat when trained by Carlos Lafont-Paria in France. He got a time form rating of, I think it was about 94. In kind of typical Mullins fashion, those 2 wins came in 2022, so he's missed a year. But it's going to be fascinating to see how he gets on. And, obviously Willie isn't short of good novice hurdlers, so the market will give us a really good clue as to what they think of this fella.
I think we interjected when we were just about to get into your Betfair hurdle thoughts. Is that right?
Well, no, not particularly, Matt. I was just going to say that we're going to pore over the Betfair hurdle for probably 48 hours and then get done by a Willie Mullins shot that's gone off at 6-4 or something. So, but we will do that research and we will come up with something.
We will be back with our selections for the weekend. Yeah, that is about all we've got time for. I'm actually just off to have a level ground with Rishi Sunak on that Castle des Mottes, I think, for Newbury. But do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on there. And that way, you'll not miss a single episode, or you won't miss any of the Get Stuck In programs or the weekend tipping previews either. So thanks for tuning in as ever, and we'll see you again next week.
Visit sportinglife.com for more analysis, tips, opinion and insight.